Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. The morning the truth began to unravel, I arrived at the Atlanta office earlier than usual. The sun was just beginning to rise over the skyline, pouring a soft golden light through the floor-to-ceiling windows and casting long shadows across the stack of financial binders on my mahogany desk. My stomach churned the moment I stepped into the room, that familiar wave of nausea I had been battling for weeks already building at the back of my throat. I pressed a hand gently over my abdomen, reminding myself silently that the sickness was worth it. After 3 years of trying, I was finally 3 months pregnant, and no one at the company, not even my husband, knew yet. I had just sat down and opened the first balance sheet when my office door swung open without a knock. My husband, Trayvon Bishop, the company's chief executive officer, walked in carrying a pale blue thermal food container I had never seen before. It was a sleek, high-end model, the kind of thing he usually bought for clients, not for me. More shocking than the container was the expression on his face. Trayvon wore a radiant, soft smile that felt strangely unfamiliar, like something borrowed from another time in our marriage. He set the container on my desk with slow ceremony, then leaned forward and said, "Good morning, baby. Happy 3rd anniversary. I wanted to do something special for you." His voice was warm, honeyed, and studied. I stared at him, caught completely off guard, then lowered my eyes to the container. For months he had been coming home late, living on his phone, blaming his mood on market pressure and shareholder demands. Now suddenly, he had gotten up before dawn to bring me breakfast? Trayvon unscrewed the lid with deliberate care. A dense cloud of steam rose into the air, carrying a pungent smell that hit me like a physical blow. "Lately I have noticed you looking pale," he said, his tone almost tender. "Work is draining you. I got up before dawn to slow cook these chitlins for you. Your favorite soul food. I want you to get your strength back. Eat them while they are hot." The smell of stewed chitlins, heavy with spices and a distinct animal scent, wrapped around my head like a noose. 6 months earlier, I might have been moved to tears by the gesture. But now my stomach twisted violently, my throat tightening as if I were about to gag. Since the pregnancy, any strong or animal-like scent had become unbearable. I forced down bile, pasted on a shaky smile, and said, "Thank you, Trayvon. That is very thoughtful. But I actually had toast at home. I am still full." For a fraction of a second, the smile slipped from his face. I saw something cold and calculating flash behind his eyes before he smoothed it over again. He nudged the container closer. "Toast is nothing. Eat a little of this for energy. I spent my whole morning cleaning and cooking these. Do not do me like that, Jasmine." His tone was soft, but there was an unmistakable pressure behind it, as if my refusal would be a personal offense. I looked into his eyes, searching for that easy, open affection I used to know so well. Instead, I found expectation, a kind of impatient anticipation that did not quite fit the picture of a loving husband bringing breakfast to his wife. Just as I was scrambling for an excuse that would not provoke an argument, there was a knock on my door. I almost sagged with relief. My new secretary, Tanisha Price, stepped in balancing a stack of documents against her chest. She wore a charcoal pencil dress that hugged her figure and a careful layer of makeup that made her look like she was always ready for a magazine cover. "Good morning, Ms. Bishop," Tanisha said, placing the documents on my desk. Her gaze drifted to the steaming container. "Oh wow, that smells incredible." She turned to Trayvon with a bright, nearly flirtatious smile. "Look at the director being so," Tanisha said, "bringing his wife breakfast this early. You are very lucky, Ms. Bishop." Her eyes lingered on Trayvon a little too long, measuring him, admiring him. Trayvon did not even acknowledge her. He kept his focus on me, expression set, as if nothing else in the room mattered. In that moment, an idea formed. I gently pushed the container in Tanisha's direction, hiding my desperation beneath a polite smile. "I just ate and I am absolutely full," I said. "It would be such a waste to let this go cold after all his effort. Tanisha, have you eaten breakfast? If not, please take it. Try it for me. Trayvon's cooking is usually very good." Tanisha's eyes widened, her lips curving into a delighted grin. She glanced quickly at Trayvon, searching for any hint of objection. He remained silent, though a faint line appeared between his brows. Tanisha clasped the container like a prize. "If you insist, Ms. Bishop," she said. "Thank you. I will not leave a single bite. I am sure anything the boss cooks is amazing." She swept out of my office with the thermos, her heels tapping briskly against the floor. As the door closed, a wave of relief washed over me. The smell of chitlins faded from my office, and my stomach slowly unclenched. I turned back to my reports, trying to ignore the faint unease prickling the back of my neck. Trayvon gave me a few brief instructions about a board meeting later that week, then left with his usual efficient stride. When the door clicked shut behind him, the office suddenly felt cavernous and chilly. I tried to focus. The columns of numbers blurred. My head swam, and I took small sips of lukewarm water from the glass on my desk. My hand drifted to my abdomen again. After 3 years of waiting, countless appointments, and quiet prayers, there was finally a child inside me. I had promised myself I would protect this baby, no matter how complicated my marriage had become. About an hour later, while I was typing an email, a loud thud echoed from the open office area outside, like something heavy collapsing onto the floor. A second later, a scream tore through the building. It was not a simple cry of surprise. It was a raw, jagged sound of pure, blistering pain. My heart lurched. I shot to my feet and rushed out into the hallway. The scene stopped me cold. Tanisha was sprawled on the carpet near her desk, her body contorting in violent spasms. The blue thermos lay on its side nearby, its contents, chitlins and thick broth, splattered across the floor. The stench of the stew mixed with the sour smell of vomit. Tanisha clutched her abdomen, her face drained of color, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth as her body convulsed. Her beige dress was darkening rapidly between her legs, the fabric soaking up a spreading pool of bright red blood. Employees rushed around in panic. Someone shouted for an ambulance. Another employee tried to hold Tanisha's shoulders to keep her from banging her head against the floor. I stood frozen, my hands trembling, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. A cold thought sliced through me like lightning. It was the stew. The stew Trayvon had brought for me. The stew I had given to Tanisha. The door to the executive office slammed open. Trayvon strode out, his usual smooth composure shattered. His eyes fell first on the blood, then on Tanisha's writhing body, and finally on the overturned thermos. For a brief moment, his expression was pure stunned disbelief. Then something darker flickered across his face, fear, horror, and something like fury twisted together. He turned to me, and the look he gave me made my skin crawl. It was not the look of a worried husband, not the concern of a leader for his collapsing employee. It was the blazing, sharp stare of someone who had carefully laid a trap and just realized the wrong person had stepped into it. He grabbed my arm so hard I cried out. "What did you do?" Trayvon hissed, his voice shaking. "Why her? Why Tanisha?" The question snapped me out of my shock. I jerked my arm away, heat rising to my face. "What did I do?" I said, my voice cold. "I could not stomach the food you brought. I passed it to your secretary. That is all. What exactly were you expecting to happen, Trayvon? Who did you think would be on the floor right now?" His jaw clenched. For a moment, he seemed to realize how much he had revealed. He took a step back, rubbing his face as if trying to erase his own reaction. The distant wail of sirens drifted in from the street. Paramedics burst through the doors a few minutes later, lifted Tanisha onto a stretcher, and wheeled her away. Trayvon followed them, but before he stepped into the elevator, he turned and looked at me with eyes full of threat. "You are coming to the hospital," he snapped. "This happened because of the food you handed her. Do not think you can avoid responsibility." I watched the elevator doors close, my knees weak. The man I had once trusted more than anyone now stood on the other side of a line I could never uncross. That bowl of chitlins had been meant for me. If not for the morning sickness twisting my stomach, I would have eaten every bite. My child would have died with me. A chill settled into my bones, and I knew I had to see this through, no matter how much it hurt. At the hospital, I sat in a hard plastic chair, hands tightly clasped together to keep them from shaking. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Trayvon paced back and forth in front of the emergency room doors like a caged animal. He ran his fingers through his hair until it stood on end, glancing occasionally in my direction with a mixture of suspicion and resentment, as if I had orchestrated what had happened to Tanisha. The doors finally opened, and a middle-aged doctor stepped out, pulling off his mask. Trayvon rushed toward him immediately. "Doctor, how is she?" he demanded. "Is it serious?" I rose slowly and walked closer, my heart pounding. The doctor looked at both of us before answering. "The patient suffered acute poisoning," he said, his tone grave. "Fortunately, she arrived quickly, so she is out of immediate danger. However, The hemorrhage was caused by ingestion of a large quantity of misoprostol. It is a medication used to induce uterine contractions, commonly for labor induction or abortion. Given the dosage we found, this was not accidental use. It was intentional. My breath caught. Misoprostol, an abortion drug. Trayvon went visibly gray. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The doctor continued, "We have already notified the police, as required by law." As if on cue, 2 officers appeared at the end of the hallway and walked toward us. The older officer asked calm questions, notebook in hand. Before I could speak, Trayvon found his voice. "Officers," he said quickly, gesturing toward me. "You need to investigate thoroughly. I prepared a stew for my wife this morning and brought it to her at the company. She kept the container in her office for a long time before handing it to my secretary. My wife has been very jealous lately and emotionally unstable. I suspect she might have slipped something into the food when I stepped out. Tanisha has been very close to me at work. My wife has always disliked that." His words hit me like a slap. I stared at him, stunned by how effortlessly he twisted the situation. He was not afraid, he was prepared. He had an explanation ready, one that painted him as the doting husband and me as the jealous, unhinged wife. I took a breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I had no reason to harm anyone," I told the officer. "You can review the hallway cameras and see that I never touched the container after Trayvon left it on my desk until Tanisha took it. You can also check for fingerprints on whatever bottle contained that medication. And I would like to know why a stew my husband claims he prepared out of concern for me was laced with an abortion drug at all." The officer nodded, making notes. Before he could ask another question, the doctor interrupted. He cleared his throat. "There is something else," he said. "The patient was 6 weeks pregnant. The high dose of misoprostol caused severe contractions and heavy bleeding. The fetus did not survive. The uterus has been badly damaged. It is unlikely she will be able to conceive in the future." The hallway fell silent. I felt the floor tip beneath me, as if I were standing on the edge of a cliff. Tanisha had been carrying Trayvon's child. The realization slammed into me with brutal clarity. Trayvon seemed to crumple inward. A strangled sound escaped his throat as he sank into a nearby chair, staring into space. He had tried to destroy my pregnancy and instead had killed his mistress's baby and shattered her future. The older officer separated us for questioning. I sat across from him in a quieter corner and recounted every detail. Trayvon's sudden appearance at my office, his insistence that I eat the stew, the way the smell had triggered my nausea, the moment I passed the container to Tanisha. I explained that I never reopened the thermos, never left it unattended, never added anything to it. Across the hall, I saw Trayvon talking animatedly to the younger officer, stressing how meticulous he was in the kitchen and how no one else had handled the stew before he sealed it and brought it to the office. The more he emphasized that no one else had touched the food before it reached me, the more he tightened the noose around his own neck. If the poison had been fully dissolved into the stew, it had to be added during or immediately after cooking while the food was still hot, not later in a closed office. When the forensic technician later reported that the drug was blended throughout the stew, not sprinkled on top, I saw the officers exchange a look that Trayvon pretended not to notice. When the hospital released us that evening, I did not go home. I returned to the office instead. My longtime assistant, Candace Miller, was waiting in my office with a laptop and a pale, determined expression. "I pulled the building and parking garage security footage like you asked," she said. "There is something you need to see." Candace queued up the footage from that morning. We watched Trayvon's car enter the parking garage at 7:15 a.m. The timestamp rolled forward. He did not step out of the elevator into our floor's hallway until 8:15. The entire trip from the garage to our offices took less than 5 minutes on a normal day. Where was he for that missing hour? Candace asked quietly. She clicked to another camera view, a grainy angle from the emergency stairwell in the basement. A man in a white shirt and mask appeared, carrying a large black trash bag. He moved quickly and nervously, cutting through the stairwell toward the rear of the building where the dumpsters were located instead of using the regular floor trash cans. "That is Leon Porter," I said immediately. Trayvon's personal assistant and distant cousin. Leon followed Trayvon's orders without question. "He rarely takes out trash himself," Candace added. "And certainly not by hand with a bag that big." The garbage truck had already come by the time Candace sent someone to check the dumpsters, but she had not stopped there. She laid a thin folder on my desk next. I asked a contact in building administration to look into Tanisha's address, Candace said. The luxury apartment she lives in over in Buckhead is not rented in her name. It is leased by a shell company. The signer is Leon. The money funding the rent comes from a representation expenses account Trayvon set up. I flipped through the bank statements. There it was in black and white. Thousands of dollars leaving company accounts every month, funneled through shell entities, paying for Tanisha's expensive apartment and lifestyle. My throat tightened. My own purse was 3 years old. Trayvon had lectured me about tightening our belts in the name of the business while he poured company funds into a love nest across town. That night, instead of going home, I arranged for Tanisha's mother to be brought from rural Alabama to Atlanta. When Mrs. Hattie Price stepped into the modest hotel lobby, clutching 2 overstuffed cloth bags, she looked small and exhausted, her simple brown dress damp from the long bus ride. Still, there was a stubborn dignity in the way she held her head. "Mrs. Price," I asked gently, extending my hand. "My name is Jasmine Bishop. I am Tanisha's boss." Her eyes filled with tears immediately. "You came yourself?" she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you. I did not know what I would find here. Tanisha calls me often. She said the company takes good care of her and that she lives in a free company dormitory. I did not imagine anything like this." I helped her sit and gave her water. "She told you she lives in a dormitory?" I asked carefully. I had the impression she was staying in a luxury apartment in Buckhead. The rent there is extremely high. I have also seen her with designer handbags that cost nearly $2,000. Mrs. Price's fingers tightened around her cup. Confusion and doubt clouded her eyes. "That cannot be right," she whispered. "My daughter is careful with money. She sends me $100 every month for my medication. She would not waste money on that." I lowered my voice. "Perhaps she did not want to worry you. Tomorrow I will take you to see her. You can ask her yourself." The next morning we went to the hospital. Tanisha lay pale and fragile in her bed, eyes dull, one hand resting protectively over the spot where her child had once been. When she saw her mother, tears spilled down her cheeks. Mrs. Price rushed to her bedside and took her hand. "What happened to you?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why did this happen?" Tanisha turned her head away, overwhelmed. Mrs. Price's gaze fell on the designer handbag resting on the bedside table and the latest generation phone beside it. The contrast between the expensive items and her own worn shoes and simple dress was impossible to ignore. She pointed at the purse, her voice shaking. "Is it true this costs $2,000? she asked. "Where did you get the money for that, Tanisha? With what you earn, you can hardly afford more than your rent and a little to send home." "It is a knockoff," Tanisha whispered quickly. "It cost $20 at a flea market. Do not listen to what anyone says." She glanced at me anxiously, but I did not contradict her aloud. Instead, I stepped closer, placed a slim file on the bedside table next to her purse, and quietly said, "I will give you both some time." Inside the file was the forged receipt Leon would later try to use to blame Tanisha for buying misoprostol herself. I intentionally left the folder slightly open so that a corner of the fake pharmacy receipt showed. As I sat in a chair by the window, pretending to scroll through my phone, I saw Tanisha's eyes flick toward the file. When her mother turned to pour water from the pitcher, Tanisha reached out, slid the file into her hands, and opened it. Her eyes widened when she saw her name written on a fresh receipt for misoprostol dated the day before the poisoning. Her shoulders began to shake. She recognized the handwriting, the timing, and the implication instantly. "He is trying to blame me," Tanisha whispered, almost inaudibly. The doctor entered then with a nurse. After checking Tanisha's chart, he cleared his throat. "I am sorry to tell you this," he said. "The overdose caused such strong contractions and bleeding that the uterus has been badly damaged. We have done everything possible, but your chances of carrying a pregnancy in the future are extremely low." Mrs. Price crumpled, sobbing, her hands pressed to her mouth. Tanisha stared at the ceiling, her face empty, as if all feeling had been burned out of her. I moved closer and spoke softly but without mercy. "This is the price of building a life on someone else's marriage," I said. "You lost your baby and your ability to be a mother because of a man who has already started shifting the blame onto you. Do you still want to protect him?" The next morning, as I was pulling my car out of our garage, a figure suddenly stepped into my path. I braked hard. Leon stood in front of the hood, sweating, eyes darting nervously around the parking lot. He tapped on my window. I lowered it an inch. "Mrs. Bishop, please," he said, his voice shaking. I need a minute. It is important. It is from Mr. Bishop. I unlocked the door and let him slide into the passenger seat. He smelled of stale tobacco and anxiety. He pulled a thin file from his jacket and placed it on my lap, then snatched his hand back as if the paper burned. "What is this?" I asked flatly. "An old medical record of Tanisha's," Leon stammered. "Mr. Bishop found it in her things. There is a pharmacy receipt in there showing she bought misoprostol herself at a shady pharmacy. He said if you take this to the police and tell them you found it in her desk, everything will be solved. He will be cleared, and you will not be implicated either. The company will survive." I opened the file slowly and lifted the receipt toward the light. The paper was pristine. The ink looked almost wet. Every instinct I had honed in finance and corporate investigations screamed that it was fake. I turned and looked Leon straight in the eyes. "Do you think I am stupid?" I asked quietly. "This ink has barely dried. You want me to hand this to the police so that when they discover it is forged, I am the one who looks guilty. And you expect me to help frame a woman who nearly died from the stew my husband cooked." Leon blanched. "I am just following orders," he whispered. "Trayvon said if you cooperate, everyone will be safe." "Everyone except Tanisha," I replied. "And except whoever goes to prison for murder." I tossed the file back onto his lap. "Take this with you and tell Trayvon that if he wants to stage a play, he should hire better actors. And you should be very careful, Leon. Being someone's accomplice will not protect you when they start looking for someone to sacrifice." Leon scrambled out of the car, clutching the file, and almost ran from the garage. By mid-morning, Candace had traced a series of late-night calls from Trayvon's phone to a number registered to a woman named Naomi Fields, a pharmaceutical representative and Trayvon's former college classmate. A day before the poisoning, security footage near Leon's shell company office showed Naomi meeting him in a quiet alley, handing him a small package wrapped in newspaper before walking away quickly. It did not take much imagination to guess what was inside. I arranged to meet Naomi the next afternoon at a discreet coffee shop downtown, a place with good cameras and quiet corners. When she walked in, she moved with the effortless confidence of a woman used to expensive clothes and admiration. Her wine-colored silk dress glowed softly under the pendant lights. She slid off her sunglasses and gave me a cool, amused smile. "Jasmine," she said, "I did not expect you to invite your husband's former almost girlfriend to coffee. Are you here for advice on how to keep a man interested?" Once, comments like that might have cut deeply. Now they barely brushed the surface. I folded my hands on the table. "I am not here to fight over Trayvon," I said quietly. "You can have him. I am here to help you avoid going to prison." Naomi laughed, though a faint tension flickered through her eyes. "Prison? For what?" "Having coffee with an old friend." I slid my phone across the table, screen turned toward her, showing the grainy image of her handing Leon the newspaper-wrapped package. Naomi stared at the picture, her fingers tightening around the phone. For the first time, the polish on her face cracked. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "It is nothing." I gave him documents. I held her gaze. "Documents that needed to be wrapped in newspaper? You are a licensed pharmacist. You know exactly what misoprostol is, and what happens when someone swallows a massive dose. The police will trace that batch sooner or later. Do you really think Trayvon will protect you when that happens?" Her shoulders sagged. The arrogance drained away, leaving behind a frightened woman clinging to the edges of her own career. "He told me you were pregnant by someone else," Naomi said, her voice raw. "He said you were cheating on him and that he just wanted to end the pregnancy quietly so he could divorce you. He said Tanisha was just a silly distraction." "I did not think," she stopped, covering her face. "I did not think it would go this far." "You had time to think when you handed that package to Leon," I replied. "Now you have a choice. You can go down with Trayvon, or you can hand over everything you have, recordings, messages, transfer confirmations, and cooperate. If you testify, you might get a suspended sentence. If you do not, you will likely lose everything and spend years behind bars." Naomi looked at me for a long time, breathing unevenly. Finally, she opened her handbag, pulled out a small silver flash drive, and placed it on the table. "Everything is on this," she said. "Recordings of his calls, screenshots of the transfers, all of it. I kept it in case he turned on me. I do not want to go to prison, Jasmine." That evening, in a quiet office belonging to a detective friend of mine, I plugged the flash drive into his computer. The room was nearly dark except for the glow of the screen. My hands shook as I clicked the first audio file. Trayvon's voice filled the room, unmistakable and ice cold. "I need something strong," he told Naomi. "Preferably colorless and without a noticeable taste. I want it to look like a spontaneous miscarriage. My wife is nauseous already. If she loses the baby, I can file for divorce without splitting the assets. I cannot let this pregnancy get in my way." Each word drove another nail into the coffin of the man I had loved. I pressed a hand over my mouth, tears stinging my eyes, while the detective sat silently beside me, his jaw set. The next recording captured Trayvon's voice after Tanisha had been rushed to the hospital. "Blame it all on her," he ordered. "Say she bought the drug herself. Tell them she was depressed. If you even think about mentioning my name to the police, you will regret it for the rest of your life." I copied the files to multiple encrypted drives and sent copies to my attorney. Then I went home. The house felt enormous and empty. Trayvon sat on the living room sofa, a glass of whiskey in his hand, the television on but muted. When I walked in, he did not smile. "Quite a spectacle at the hospital," he said hoarsely. "Are you satisfied now that everyone is whispering about us?" He went to the kitchen and returned with a steaming glass of milk. "Drink this," he said, setting it in front of me. "You look thin. I worry about you. It is imported. Very good for women who need strength." The word women caught between us. My hand hovered over the glass. "Like the chitlins you brought to the office?" I asked quietly. "You said that was for my strength too. Tanisha almost died. Are you sure this is just milk?" His expression flickered. "You're being paranoid," Trayvon said. "I am your husband." I picked up the glass, walked to a potted plant in the corner, and slowly poured the milk into the soil. The liquid soaked in quickly, leaving the glass empty. "If it is harmless, the plant will enjoy it," I said. "Let us see how it looks tomorrow." Trayvon stared at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He understood that whatever mask he had worn before had fallen away. I knew who he was now. The next day, the boardroom on the top floor was crowded. The shareholders had gathered to vote on an ambitious eco-resort project Trayvon had been pushing aggressively. A project I now knew was designed to funnel company money into his shell accounts before he lost control. Trayvon stood at the head of the table, dark circles under his eyes, his suit hanging more loosely than usual. He tapped a pen against the polished surface as he spoke about vision and growth. When he finished his presentation and called for a vote, I rose slowly from my seat. The scrape of my chair against the floor cut through the murmurs. "Before we decide how to spend the company's money," I said, my voice calm but carrying to every corner of the room, "I believe the board deserves to know what kind of person is managing it." "Jasmine, this is not the place," Trayvon snapped. "If you have personal issues with me, we can discuss them at home." I kept my eyes on the shareholders. "This is not a personal issue," I said. "This is about corporate fraud and attempted murder." Gasps rippled around the table. I nodded to Candace, who connected my laptop to the projector. On the screen behind Trayvon, bank transfers appeared. Large sums routed from company accounts to Leon's shell company, and then to Tanisha's landlord and to an account linked to Naomi. After the financial records, I played the recordings from Naomi's drive. Trayvon's voice echoed through the room, asking for a drug that would cause a clean miscarriage, referring to my pregnancy as an obstacle, ordering Naomi to pin the blame on Tanisha once things went wrong. Some of the older board members looked physically ill. One woman covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. "This audio has been authenticated," I told them. "A copy has already been delivered to the police, along with forensic reports on the poisoned stew and statements from witnesses." Trayvon lunged toward the projector, trying to yank out the cable, but two security guards I had quietly instructed earlier stepped in front of him. "It is fake," he shouted. "She is manipulating the files. She wants the company for herself. I am the victim here." Before he could say more, the doors to the boardroom opened. Two officers stepped inside, followed by Naomi, pale behind her sunglasses, and my attorney. "Mr. Bishop," one officer said, "you are under arrest for suspected assault, attempted homicide, and unlawful use of pharmaceutical substances." At the far end of the table, Leon tried to slip out discreetly, but another officer intercepted him. Within minutes, both men were in handcuffs, the clink of metal echoing in the stunned silence. As Trayvon was led past me, he stopped and looked up, his eyes burning with a mixture of fury and bewilderment. "Since when have you been planning this?" he asked in a hoarse whisper. "We were husband and wife, Jasmine. How could you be this cruel?" I met his gaze steadily. "Since the morning you brought me that bowl of chitlins," I said. You tried to kill our child to protect your money. Sending you to prison is not cruelty. It is the least justice I can live with. The trial moved faster than I had expected. Between the recordings, forensic analysis, the security footage, Naomi's cooperation, and Leon's eventual confession, the evidence was overwhelming. The jury found Trayvon guilty. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Naomi received a suspended sentence in exchange for her testimony, but her pharmacist's license was revoked. Leon, who had tried to blame everyone but himself, received a shorter term but left the courtroom sobbing, his future in ruins. Tanisha was discharged from the hospital and moved with her mother into a small rental on the outskirts of the city. The air in the cramped apartment smelled faintly of damp and old paint. When I visited, Mrs. Price was packing clothes into a worn cloth bag. She wiped her eyes when she saw me. "We are going back home," she said quietly. Tanisha knows she made terrible choices. She does not want to be a burden here. Tanisha sat on the edge of the bed, her hair pulled back loosely, her eyes hollow. She could not quite bring herself to look at me. I set an envelope on the small plastic table. "This is her last paycheck," I said, "and some additional help. Use it for the move and for treatment if she needs it. She has already paid a devastating price. There is no need to punish her further." Tears slid down Mrs. Price's face. Tanisha finally looked up at me, shame and grief swirling in her gaze. "I am sorry," she whispered. "Not just for what happened to me, for what I did to you." I held her eyes. "Do not ever build your life on someone else's destruction again," I said. "If you rebuild, do it in a way that would make your mother proud." After Trayvon's conviction, the company staggered under the weight of scandal, but it did not fall. As majority shareholder and the one who had exposed the fraud, I was appointed interim chief executive officer. My first decision was to dismiss Trayvon's entire inner circle and bring in an independent audit team. I stood before the press, apologized for what had happened under our roof, and promised full cooperation with authorities. It was not easy, but over the next 2 years, the company slowly regained its footing. During that time, Trayvon's mother, Beatrice, appeared in my office once, furious and elegant in her silk suit and heavy jewelry. "You destroyed my son," she said, slamming her hands on my desk. "You put him in prison to keep everything for yourself. He is a good man. He would never hurt anyone. You are the real monster here." I said nothing at first. Then I played for her one of the recordings, letting her listen as her son described my pregnancy as an obstacle he needed to eliminate. When the audio ended, Beatrice sank slowly into the chair opposite me, her face ashen. "That stew," I said quietly, "was meant for me. If I had eaten it, the child I carry now would not be here. Your son did not care about the life of his secretary's baby or mine. He cared about his assets and his image. If you want to be angry at the man who made those choices, not at the woman who survived them." She left without another word. 6 months after the trial, on a stormy night when lightning painted the windows white, I went into labor. The pain was fierce, but it came with a strange, steady calm. In the same hospital where Tanisha had nearly died, I gripped the rails of the bed and focused on every breath. After what felt like a lifetime, I heard my daughter's cry fill the room, strong and clear. The nurse laid her on my chest, warm and tiny, her fingers curling instinctively around mine. I named her Serenity. Holding her, I thought of that morning in my office, the smell of chitlins, the blue thermos on my desk, Trayvon's strange smile. If not for the violent nausea that had turned my stomach, this child would never have taken her first breath. The realization made my throat tighten. Fate had been cruel to some, merciful to others, and absolute in its consequences. 2 years later, I stood by the window of my corner office on the 20th floor, watching the Atlanta skyline glow under a clear blue sky. The company was stable again. Our employees no longer whispered about scandal in the hallways, and the board trusted my judgment. Behind me, I heard the rush of small footsteps. Serenity, now a lively toddler with bright eyes and a laugh that could cut through any dark mood, ran into my arms. I lifted her easily, breathing in the scent of her hair. My phone buzzed with a message from Kendrick Moore, a reliable business partner who had gradually become a quiet, steady presence in my life. "Do you and Serenity want to get out of the city this weekend?" he had written. "I know a peaceful spot in the country. No meetings, no talk of numbers. Just fresh air." I looked from the message to my daughter's curious face. She patted my cheek and giggled. I smiled, typed a simple reply, "We would love to," and slipped the phone back into my pocket. I carried Serenity to the window, holding her close as we both looked out at the city that had been the backdrop for so much pain and so much survival. The life I had once imagined with Trayvon was gone, buried under evidence files and courtroom transcripts. In its place was something quieter, stronger, and more honest. My child in my arms, my own name on the office door, and the knowledge that I had chosen to stand up instead of collapse. The past would always be there, but it no longer held me by the throat. The sky was clear. For the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.